maybe we have brought up a good point, and in the future it'll just be mutant choir and then varsity mutant choir.
That would sound super fun, actually.
People would sign up right and left.
Or how about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles eat pizza? So we just call it the pizza choir. Then you'll have a crazy amount of kids sign up for that choir.
Pizza choir and varsity pizza choir. Like, does varsity pizza choir get to eat like bigger pizzas?
Yes,
like,
more pizza events.
Crazy. You have to audition by eating pizza and see how fast you can do it.
Higher rated pizzas.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Choir Guys podcast, brought to you by GIA Publications and Walton Music. My name is Blake Richter.
And I am Danny Gutierrez.
Oh, I think you should just make it longer and longer each week.
I am Danny Gutierrez.
That was beautiful as well. What are we going to talk about this week, Danny?
We're going to talk about unchanged male voices.
I thought you were going to say changing diapers.
I was just thinking about as I was saying it, I was like, what is the politically correct way to say this? And that's why I was going super slow. I was like, the changing, male to tenor-based male voices.
We're going to talk about everything tenor-based voices this week, and it's going to be a great time.
Boom.
Dude, so when it comes to like teaching tenor-based voices, it's always awkward at middle school. Speaking of awkwardness at middle school, this last week was real awkward and real weird. Things are always weird at the middle school level, as you know, because you taught middle school for a long time, and you still do first hour every day. But last week was probably the weirdest week. It was just like a half of the week. Wednesday through Friday was probably the weirdest type of week I've ever had at the middle school level.
Was it a full moon? I think it was a full moon.
I have no idea, but I subbed as principal last Wednesday, and nothing really crazy happened until the very end of the day. I was subbing for an advisory class, and in the middle of the advisory class, this girl literally took a tampon out of her purse and chucked the cotton portion of the tampon, just threw it at my face. And then another thing happened. We don't like people chewing gum on the risers, and so there's this girl that looked like she was chewing gum on the risers, and I was like, hey, are you chewing gum on the risers? And she looked at me and she said, no, I'm chewing on a baby. She pulls out one of those plastic babies out of her mouth, and then her friend next to her goes, it's our baby. So that was interesting. And then another thing happened where this girl, we were just looking at her and she had like a normal face, and then just randomly she opens up her mouth and spews out her entire Apple Watch and the band, and it just like comes out like a long tongue. So that was last week. It was a great time. Now it's time for our first segment, Hack Yeah!
Hack yeah!
That was delayed.
Hack yeah!
That was sad.
Hack yeah!
Thank you. Danny, what is your hack this week?
Well, this is something I think I realized recently, especially working with, so this is treble voice thing. We're going to talk about tenor bass voices later, but treble voice stuff. My new approach with treble voices has been working on their the passaggio uno first, their first break, the primo passaggio around the C sharp area. I find that once that's really solid, good things happen after that. So I'm of the approach as it gets toward the breaks in the voice, especially the first break, we try to slenderize the throat a little bit. It's a more closed throat position. However, it still has beauty and resonance, and it's not clench. It's just a more slender position. So we work toward modification there. So what I'll do is I'll go aua or something auga, because it's fun to say auga. We'll go aua mostly though, and we'll go aua, going toward that breaking, making sure that it has that closed quality to it. Sometimes the closed quality can be misconstrued as a darker quality, but really it's just getting past the break. And when that happens, there's a certain relaxation that happens. What I've noticed a lot with my treble choirs in the past is that as they get toward the break, it almost feels like they're at the edge of their voices. It's too pressed, too pinched, and they'll start doing weird physical things. So now we've kind of taken an approach of really being technical about that first break. And I find that the more time I work in the beginning of class on the first break, the smoother, quite literally, the smoother everything else is. So it's working on the first break first with treble voices, and that allows for a lot easier time of vocalism later on.
Beautiful. My hack also involves breaks, but not that kind of break. My hack is very simple. but also something that a lot of choir directors don't do enough of. We are given personal days for a reason, so we should take them. I have been guilty of not taking enough personal days in the past. This year, I feel like I've been gone a little too much, but it's been because of some other stuff. But it is so important to make sure that you take mental health days or personal days and days just for you, because you can't be good for your kids. You can't be good for your choir program. You can't be good for your colleagues. You can't be good for your family if you're not taking care of yourself. So take those personal days. I know in the past, Danny, if we're honest, there have been times where you and I have not gotten along, and it has been a lot of the times is because I was overworking
There's no
myself.
personal days.
There were no personal days taken off. This year has been so much better with I've taken a lot of personal days off, or I've taken days off to just like focus on certain other aspects of my life. And you know what? Life moves on, and like the kids will survive. And also we both have the, immense gift of having co-teachers that can keep things going while we're gone. So I always tell my co-teacher, and you as well, tell my co-teachers, like, it's important to take those days off, and like we will hold down the fort while you're gone. Like take a day to just relax, because being a choir director isn't always the easiest thing, but it is very fun, and it's only fun if we are taking care of ourselves and if we are healthy. So take those days off. It's gonna help immensely. Now it's time to shout out our first sponsor, GIA Publications and Walton Music. GIA Publications is a family-owned company with over 10,000 choral and instrumental editions in print and a wide variety of music education resources.
Walton Music, one of the catalogs in the GIA family, is one of the world's leading choral music publishers. With a catalog spanning over 6 decades and music from across the globe, Walton editions are performed by choirs worldwide.
That's right. You can find Walton choral editions at waltonmusic.com and music education resources and books at giamusic.com. So I would like to shout out one piece this week, and that piece would be Does the World Say by Kyle Peterson. For some reason, the first time I heard this was just back in January, even though it's been out for a while and like everybody's been singing it. But I heard it at our state conference, and I was moved by it. And then I heard it also our 7th through 9th grade SWACTA honor choir girls sang it, so some of my kids got to sing it. And as I was looking for rep for next year, I was like, that song's been done a lot, but I wonder if there'd be like a tenor bass voicing of this. It's a very, very emotional and deep text that sometimes boys, they might not be able to necessarily dig into. But I've had a good time this year digging into some of those emotional texts with boys. And so I reached out to Kyle because, I did his Bringers of Noise a few years ago, and I made a video of it, and we became friends on Facebook after that. And he is literally just the nicest guy. And I said, hey, could we ever, commission you to do a tenor bass version of Does the World Say? He said, actually, I just did a tenor bass version for this church somewhere just back in January. Let me just send you the score. And he just sent it to me, and I looked at it, and it's, a TTBB version of it, and it's awesome. So I wanted to shout that out because, first of all, Kyle Peterson is amazing, and his music is awesome, and you should just become best friends with Kyle Peterson. I literally have never met him in real life, but like I've gotten some honor choir gigs because of him, and we chat a lot on Facebook, and he's just awesome. So thanks, Kyle, for writing some awesome music.
Thanks again to GIA Publications and Walton Music for sponsoring today's episode. So I have certain friends that do not care about who they're friends with on Facebook. So they will accept everyone's friendships. It's concerning because I don't know, like I see mutual friends. I'm like, oh, we have mutual friends. Then I realize that they're friends with literally everyone and anyone. There are several choral people out there. I'm not going to say your name out loud, but you know exactly who you are. Think about it. You accept everyone's friend requests, everyone all the time. And then when I see like someone offers me their friendship, I see the same people in the choral world, friends with them. I know what that means. I know that means that this person is just friends with everyone.
I feel like you're calling me out.
No, is that you?
It's sometimes me, and my wife gets on to me about it. Sometimes she'll be like, hey, give me your phone. And she goes through, and my friend list, she goes, who's this? I'm like, well, look at their bio. Are they a choir person? And then she'll be like, yes, but do you know them? I'm like, no, but they work at this university. She's like, delete. And she'll just go through and delete. But, sometimes it's fun to network. But yeah, it's kind of creepy to just accept anybody that you don't know.
And I've done this before. It all depends on the person. So I don't know if Kyle Peterson, I'm not implying anything about Kyle Peterson. Like he's that guy that just sends out requests. I might be that guy.
He's not that guy. I reached out to him because of I wanted to get his permission to post Bringers of Noise like online.
And he accepted your friendship?
And he accepted my friendship because I said, here's the recording. And he was like, that's a really good recording. Can I put it on my website? And I was like, absolutely. And that's how we became friends.
Oh,
so
nice. That's cool.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah. You rock. Come on the podcast.
All right. So now we're going to get into our discussion about tenor bass voices. Sometimes, actually, I'm a little bit weary even still about calling it a tenor bass voice because male voices, I would say, especially if they're changing, rarely even fall under tenor bass voice. A lot of time they're like moving alto voice / kind of a soprano voice.
Well, yeah,
could be a tenor, could be a bass voice.
I have a student who's going to be in your Crimson Chorale next year who is singing a soprano solo, which is not like, it's not necessarily the highest thing ever, but it's very much a treble solo, and he's singing it because he nailed it more than all the soprano, alto, treble voices. He crushed it. So, yeah it's kind of like it's a voice.
Yeah,
it's all over the place.
And it's interesting because I know there's the movement away from calling it like a men's choir. But in the same sense, I don't know if tenor bass choir is necessarily the most accurate depiction of that choir either. And now I know there's a lot of considerations when you look at a lot of middle level tenor bass literature. I know they take that into consideration, the fact that they're calling tenors. Really, they're writing it as like a low alto line, but they're in actuality, it says technically tenor, even though it's not tenor. But
so, Danny, what are we working with these tenor bass voices, or whatever kind of voices you wanna talk about?
Sure. So this is how I break it down in my head, and this is what makes sense. I think of it like five different points of mutations is what I think about. Now, it's not actual mutations. Yeah, I just think like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it kind of sounds cool. But 5 different, this is why I tell students often, I'll say there's the 5 different levels of mutant voices that we're going to talk about. So the first one I would say is completely unchanged. Like when I think of my son, Christian, who is 6 years old, I think of him as a completely unchanged male voice, right? Completely unchanged.
His voice is
super, no puberty yet. Super high, just whatever that entails, completely unchanged. Now, the second one I would consider, so Mutant 2, mostly unchanged. Now, they might still have a very high voice. This one is mostly has a positive spin to it. It's a strong treble voice. So there's a difference between Christian, who's 6, and often when he's singing in head voice, it's a kind of a light, breathy sound, but it's a lovely sound. When I think of a second one, I think of a mostly unchanged but a strong treble voice. So I can think of someone in our first hour class toward the left, very animated, very passionate choir student. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
He, I would say, is a category 2. Now, his voice is super high when he talks, but it's different. And sometimes I can often I can tell the difference between a voice like that who can sing functionally soprano and alto, and the speaking voice of, let's say, like just a female, right? So their speaking voice, to my ear, is different. However, they have similar singing ranges. It's a really great spot to be in if you're type 2 voice. I think of that type of voice singing like the soprano solo in Chichester Psalms, or like the shepherd boy in the opera Tosca. It's a beautiful ringing sound, like what you think about is your quintessential like professional boys choir type of sound, Then after that, I would say there's this thing called cambiata. So cambiata is kind of a mix. It's like in the middle of changing. I find that the range of a cambiata is a little bit different. Typically, I feel like what I find, the lowest notes they can typically hit is like a low E flat or so, like a D, E flat, somewhere in there, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
The color of their voice is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a darker color. I would say maybe some warmth in the sound as well. Kind of depending on the person's technique and training, obviously. It can be a lighter, lower sound as well. I would say if you weren't to take in consideration voice changing, I would label it like a nice alto 2 sound, maybe an alto 1 sound, but I would say more alto 2, but a very warm colored, beautiful alto 2 sound. Actually, what I did when I taught exclusively middle level choirs and I had mixed choirs, I loved cambiata voices. I loved putting them as a low alto part. I thought it was the most gorgeous sound they would produce. Not too chesty, not a lot of like, there wasn't much of that going on. It was just gorgeous, gorgeous sound happening there. And cambiata voices, I would say, are very susceptible to cracking. I'm not very susceptible. I would say it's starting to happen a little bit. You hear the change a little bit in their speaking voice, especially. I would say who's very prone to cracking is actually, for me, it's the type 4. It's the mostly changed voice, right?
Love crack.
Yes, but not completely changed, but mostly changed. Typically, I find those voices going down to about like a B flat, B, maybe an A, but it's mostly like B flat, B. Sometimes like the lowest note is C. But you can tell like, okay, this is a changed voice, but it's not completely changed. They have some of the characteristics as a fully mature sound, but it's not quite what it is yet. And then I would say, boom, changed voice comes at some point after that. Now, I think it's important to think in these terms because it gets us out of the thinking, okay, unchanged tenor, changed bass, because I don't think that's necessarily the best way of looking at it. That's why I'm a little weary about using the term tenor bass, because I don't think it's it's a proper classification. I don't think, because I know that a lot of singers, they think, oh, my voice has changed, I'm now a bass. But what I tell students for myself is that I started, when I was in high school, I was a bass. When I was in college, I was a bass until my junior year, and then I became a tenor. And sometimes when I say that to students, they go, what? How is that possible? And I was like, because I learned how to sing properly. That's how it's possible. So, but that's how I try to view voices like that. And within those categories, I love having a fully changed voice straight up in the tenor section because it's extremely appropriate a lot of the times, at least at middle level. In high school, obviously, I'm doing that all the time. But
yeah, there's this kid that is a junior now at your school. And whenever I had him I didn't have him as a 7th grader, but whenever I came and he was in 8th grade, there was one day where he sang almost the lowest note on the piano, and he was a bass 2 in my choir. And now he's a tenor 1 in your choir.
Oh, yeah.
Because he
Boots and cats, eh?
Yeah. I mean, he also could beatbox. Yeah, that's just, that's the wild thing about the male voice.
It's funny because I was working with him today, and whenever he has anything lower than an A, you can barely phonate over there. But when he sings higher, it comes out great. It just goes to show you about vocal maturation and what happens over time. You just never. There's so much more. It's so much more nuanced than just simply tenor or bass, right?
Yeah. You'll notice that I'm not going to talk much about this because this isn't Danny's wheelhouse. He geeks out about this stuff, and he
fully understands.
I do understand it, but he knows how to talk about it in a more intellectual way. I'm just like, these boys are singing this and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there's one time where we gave a presentation called Curing TB, like tuberculosis. And I guess now you're saying, keep the TB to tuberculosis. We don't even need to label boys as TB anymore. Just label tuberculosis with TB.
Yeah, I don't know how would we label it if we're not saying, men's boys choirs, or if we're not saying tenor bass choir, what would it be called?
Yeah, it should be just the mutant group.
Mutant group.
The mutant group.
That sounds fun.
That would be, I think people would sign up for sure.
So when we think about technical considerations for each voice type, here are some of my thoughts on it, just my raw thoughts on the matter. So when I hear a voice that's, let's say, mostly unchanged, it is my desire for that voice to sing as high as possible, as long as possible, because I feel like that's going to be best for them in the long run. I find that late voice changers tend to maintain the integrity of the higher voice better later on. So case in point, I think Blake's voice changed when he was 21. Was that right?
It was late, but it wasn't
last
that
week.
Late.
Okay, I don't know.
I'd say it was It was like right before 16. So I usually say like 15, 16 is when it happened.
15, 16. So, and Blake has a beautiful voice, and I know he considers himself a baritone, but I think a lot of, and I thought about this before, like when you're singing sometimes in class, I just think, I wonder why that's so smooth. I feel like you have a very like easy sound, and it's all, when I hear your sound, I feel like it's all initiated from the breath and this nice floating, spinning place. Not a lot of like a lot of that lower like grit in the sound. And I feel like one of the reasons that we could possibly attribute that to is just having like a later voice change. And I do wonder about that. So I think typically when I have a higher voice like that, I just like to keep them. I mean, preferably, I would like to keep them alto or soprano. I know it's tough when you have a tenor bass choir to have them in that range because it's not written for that. But I like to keep. It's almost like a violin. You want to make sure you're not pressing too hard or it's not going to come out right. You want to keep it light and floaty, and that's what I try to do with upper voices. So, Blake, what type of literature are you going to program for specific types of voice types?
I think it all depends on who you have in the room, who the personnel, what level of mutation it is, obviously. But for me, like we do label it as tenor bass choir. Maybe we have brought up a good point, and in the future it'll just be mutant choir and then varsity mutant choir.
Yeah, that would sound super fun, actually.
People would sign up right and left.
Or how about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles eat pizza? So we just call it the pizza choir. Then you'll have a crazy amount of kids sign up for that choir.
Pizza choir and varsity pizza choir. Like, does varsity pizza choir get to eat like bigger pizzas?
Yes,
like,
more pizza events.
Crazy. You have to audition by eating pizza and see how fast you can do it.
Higher rated pizzas.
Yes, that'd be great. As far as literature goes, there are just some people who know and understand middle school boy voices. They understand these different levels of mutation, whether they know it or not. They just know how to write for these voices. So you'll never go wrong with a Laura Farnell. You'll never go wrong with a Dan Davison. Those are some people that really understand these middle level voices. Also, Roger Emerson does a pretty good job of those middle level voices as well. But you're wanting to not program anything with the basses going too low, which is funny because sometimes when I write for our choirs, I write it way too low. But I'm also writing for high school voices as well. But so I try to change it for our boys.
You have a lot of optional notes in there too.
Yeah, I do have some optional notes, and that's what's nice too about some of these arrangers and some of these composers is they'll throw that in. So that way, high school voices or high school tenor bass choirs or mutant choirs, they can throw in some of those extra notes. There's one boy in our tenor bass choir in the mornings that can hit like a low, low, low E that I cannot hit, and I would not be able to show you an example. You can hit it. So like there are people that can do it. You're about to. You're thinking about it. You look like you're about to.
It's the end of I was thinking about it, but it wasn't coming out, so no.
I didn't know if I needed a trash can there. I would just not program anything with tenors going necessarily like higher than, well, it depends on their level of mutations, because there are some boys in our choir that can hit a C, or I guess 2 C's above middle C. So what is that? C6?
I don't know.
Whatever. I don't know the numbers. So don't judge me. And then basses, if you want to be safe with the basses, I would say nothing lower than a C below middle C.
Yep.
Or like a D.
I think that's solid.
So when you're thinking of literature there, but I was getting to the tenors. I think it's safe to like not go anywhere above that G above middle C. But again, there are some boys that can go way higher in our class. I had a bass today that hit, I think it was like an F6, and he was a bass in our second hour class, in our varsity singers class, and he hit an F6 today, and it was insane. It didn't sound good, but like they can do it. What about you? You're gonna have way more to say about literature than me.
Well, it's different. It just depends on the ensemble too. I mean, with male ensembles, tenor bass ensembles. I mean, typically the literature is going to be the literature. So I agree with every one of the arrangers, composers that you just said. I think they write. They obviously have experience in the field of working with middle level voices, so it makes sense that they would write well for those type of voices under those considerations. Where I've done some different stuff before, so one time I had an SATB choir, a really good one too, in middle level, we had him sing SSA, but the A was pretty low. But what I noticed was as a result of doing that, it really corrected a lot of tone issues and a lot of pitch issues they had because they all had to approach it from above, and it kind of aligned a lot of things. So that was a really neat thing that I figured out. Yeah, and it just depends on I think you pretty much hit it all. I mean, there's just some people that really work great for that type of literature. I would definitely consider limited ranges in certain respects, but in the same sense, there are some cambiata voices that can sing super low and super high simultaneously. Yeah. I would say that there are some cambiata voices that have larger ranges than most humans alive.
We have some in our Tenor 2 section that are exactly. 8th graders in our first hour.
Exactly. And it's interesting because you really can't pigeonhole anything, because I know some people are adamant, they have like less than an octave of functional range. Some do, but some have like 3 to 4 octaves of functional range, and they're in that cambiata category. So it just depends on a lot of things like the experience, where they are voice change wise, and also what kind of teaching they have too. Also, they have to be encouraged to sing higher. Yeah. That's another part of it too, because a lot of people, I find that a lot of teachers, they're self-conscious about giving that type of student higher literature. So what they'll do, almost like as a reward, they'll just give them lower stuff. Oh, we'll have you sing the lower stuff. We need a lower voice here, and we'll give you the lower stuff. When actually I think it's kind of killing a lot of their range. I would encourage them to sing higher and explore that mechanism. And I know there's a lot of other things to consider too. So moving on to our next point, we're going to talk about the greatest challenges with male voices. I think the greatest challenges are actually not physical. I don't think so. I think the greatest challenges are mental and emotional. Yeah. I think those are the greatest challenges. I think getting someone to the point where they're comfortable making certain types of sounds. So case in point, when I was in 6th grade, I remember distinctly being in class and singing higher one day. And I was always self-conscious about it, but I was like, I'm not sure if this is what I should be doing, but I'm just going to sing higher because I think maybe I should be doing this type of sound. And I remember my music teacher passing me, and she said, "Danny, great job. That's a wonderful sound." And in my head, I thought, is she saying that because she's feeling bad for me? Or is she saying that because it's actually a really good sound? And it was probably a pretty good sound that I was making at the time. But unless she explicitly said that, I would think that it was wrong. I really had no conception of what voice to use, like growing up and at any point in my middle adulthood. Except for my voice changed. But before that point, I just had no conception.
Well, I remember kind of a similar thing when I was in 4th grade. That was the first year I did choir. So like, I guess before that, like maybe 3rd grade or so, I'll even include a little clip of me trying to sing like All Star by Smash Mouth.
Okay.
In 3rd grade on my karaoke machine with my brother. I will include that clip right here.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ate the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind of dumb with the finger and the thumb in the shape of the nail on her forehead. Well,
you'll notice in that clip, I am trying to sing as low as the lead singer of Smash Mouth. Mm-hmm. And so like I would hear all these voices on the radio, and I would try to imitate those voices, and they were lower than anything I could do, obviously, because my voice had not changed. And it did change a little bit before 21, Daniel.
I don't know.
But it did take a while for my voice to change. In choir, with my choir director in 4th grade in Clarksville, Tennessee at Sango Elementary, I finally learned how to get up there and how to sing in head voice and falsetto. And then I started singing like that at church. And I even remember like looking at my dad and my mom and being like, look, like, I'm not tone deaf, because my brother was this incredible singer and still is. Mm-hmm. And like, I'll include a video of him singing that same day on this, so you can hear how incredible he was.
oh, sing does that star spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
So he's singing like that, and then I am singing like I don't know anything. But then when I figured out, like, I just have to sing higher. I have to sing in my falsetto. I have to sing in my head voice. When I figured that out, that's what changed the game. And I don't think I would have become, I wouldn't have gotten into music. I wouldn't have become a choir director for sure if I didn't figure that out in 4th grade.
I think that's interesting too, because, okay, so the same scenario, this would have been me. If I would have used that higher voice, I would be looking at my parents, but not to say, oh, look, I can sing in tune. I would have looked at them to see how they thought of me singing that high, because I probably would have felt shameful.
Do you think I'm girly?
Yeah, I would have thought like, oh, they're thinking this is a feminine voice or something along those lines. And honestly, that's what I thought. So the reason why it was so interesting when that teacher, the 6th grade teacher, encouraged me, because I just assumed that it was the wrong way to sing, and I assumed
I'm a man. I'm supposed to sing low.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's the social connotations, and really that's the great battle that we fight every day. I can't tell you how many battles we fight of I hear this and it drives me insane. Oh, I can't really do choir because I'm focusing on sports now, and I don't have room in my schedule for that. You don't have room in your schedule for choir because you're focusing on after school sports? Question mark. Yeah, I don't have room for that because I'm focusing on that and my schedule's booked right now. I'm like, no, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. But it comes from, I think, the social connotation, like male athletes don't equal singers. And I think those are the real battles, like in anything I see. And if you even think about another mental, emotional battle you're going to face is think about voices cracking, right? So what happens when someone tries preventing their voice from cracking? They do a few things. One thing is they stick their head out, or they'll do this and you'll see their like veins popping out. You see their chin popping out because they feel so humiliated when their voice cracks. Thus, my motto, and that I present on this quite a few times, is embrace the crack. But it's more than just even a vocal tool, and I think it is a vocal tool, understanding why your voice cracks and how to use that to hit pitches or to have the right tone or the healthiest tone possible. But I think also it's embracing that that your voice, it's okay, first off, to make mistakes, and it's okay to figure out things within your own voice. And that's another thing I try to encourage with male singers. It's fighting against that. A lot of tones that I hear that are very strident and are very pushy are a product of just guys trying to do whatever they can to not let their voice crack, because they feel like if they let their voice crack, it's going to be humiliating and embarrassing. Normally, have you ever given points out in class for a student's voice cracking?
Absolutely.
I have given trillions of points on the matter. Trillions of points for students' voice cracking, because I think normalizing those type of things might be even more important than even literature selection. Mm-hmm. It's having the right mentality to sing and encouraging the right mentality in students. How do you sing as a tenor bass voice? As a male voice. That's why it's tricky always saying tenor bass voice, because I don't really even know if it's about that at the end of the day.
And I love that you brought up, all these students wanting to pursue sports instead of choir and all this stuff, and thinking, choir's girly. I feel like Taylor Schaefer, who we've talked about a few times on this show, he always finds these videos of like these either athletes or like role models, like the Stranger Things cast. There's this video of them singing, it might have been like a Jackson 5 something or other. There's a video of that. Also, the Kelsey brothers singing on the Philadelphia Eagles Christmas album. And then there's that new commercial recently with the two guys from the OKC Thunder, SGA, and then the rookie with the beard, who's their center or whatever.
From OKC Thunder?
Yeah.
The rookie, Chet, whatever his name is?
Holmgren. And there's a video of them singing What a Pro Wants.
Yeah.
What a Pro. I feel like if we start normalizing that more and how we have more videos of that, this problem's going to go away. And we've already started to see that go away because of what Taylor's doing at the intermediate level and at the elementary level. And we have a lot of athletes that are coming in.
I think some other cool things that I think Lauren, your co-teacher, mentioned too, is that when you do like big events where you have a lot of people, instead of wearing like a choir shirt, wear a shirt that has an activity that you're passionate about on it. So instead of having a bunch of choir kids, like, oh, these are the choir kids, of course they're singing, have like, wear your football shirts, wear your basketball shirts, wear these things to kind of normalize that.
We did that in our recruitment video. And I know when Lauren has gone on tour at our other schools, that's what they wear on recruitment tours to the intermediates, is they will wear all those things. It's genius. So Danny, like what exercises do you use and do we use in the classroom to align and strengthen these male voices?
Yeah. So for me, it depends on the level. So for younger, more like 7th, 8th grade voices, even 6th grade voices, I'm going to do different activities than I would for, let's say, a proficient voice. So for changing voices, like in the middle of like cambiata type of voices around that level, or even like change voices, but not fully change voices, it'll be a lot of things to help them get their higher sound involved. Now, when I say get their higher sound involved, I don't even necessarily mean singing higher. I just mean getting that lighter mechanism involved. A lot of times, I'll find like new students come in. I'll go, okay, sing this note. And they'll go, And they're like, all right, sing that note. And they'll go, And I'll sing that note. All right, sing higher. They go, instead of going up and down in pitch. So I find that a lot of that is because of, I think there's also an emotional, mental element to that as well. But I think what it comes down to is them favoring the thyroid, the lower vocalese mechanism, and trying to just go to the lowest possible note. So when a voice changes and they're starting to speak in that voice, they tend to favor it because they're doing it more frequently now. So they think singing is the exact same mechanism as that is. And although it is a very similar mechanism, it's not the exact same. So getting students comfortable with kind of using more of that lighter tone in the sound. So it's a lot of ooh-oriented things. It could be like ooh descending is what I do a lot of. Ooh, or it could be in some sort of scale, 5-note pattern, something, just to see if I can get their higher voice into that lower range in some capacity. And a lot of times they'll have to sing lighter too. So what I notice a lot in middle level singing is you'll have, let's say in a mixed choir, you'll have a soprano and alto section, and you'll have a few just guys in the middle of the choir. And obviously, it's hard to get balance when you just have a few guys against a bunch of sopranos and altos, and you'll see the director look over to the guys and go like this, like, more sound, we want more sound. So they go from singing like kind of nice but softer to going
pushing
and like making that sound. And really, I think it just needs to be encouraged to kind of sing lighter sometimes.
Fluff.
Yes, and I understand that it's difficult for logistical situations, but you'd rather hear an in-tune sound, a sound that is healthy, rather than a louder sound that's overly strident. So that's just things that I consider. As the student gets older, I consider different things. So if they have a level of proficiency, once they have that established, the lighter mechanism, I'm more working toward core in the sound, and it is more like the speaking voice. So here's what I do working with change voices. I work basically, I would say in like 3 or 4 gears with them. So the normal gear is like their speaking range. So I'm speaking in this voice, so I'll do a lot. If the notes are in that passage, I'll say just use your speaking voice, but a supported speaking voice. So, this range right here, this is kind of like speaking range. Higher will be more of like a calling out voice. It's not necessarily louder though. It's just more of a calling out sound. So here's speaking range. I'm just talking, blah, blah, blah. I go a little higher. And then this is more like calling range a bit. I'm kind of calling out a bit. People might hear that and say, oh, it's more head voice. It's more of a supported sound. It's more cricothyroid in the sound.
Is that how you call out to your children when you want them to eat?
Children,
it's time to eat.
Yes.
I am calling out.
I don't like that, dada. Yeah. So then I'll use more of a calling type of voice there. And then the next level of voice would be like the more transitioning voice, F sharp, G. And this is more like a weird sound. It's more like a cackling sound. So speaking, blah, I'm speaking, and then I get to the calling, and then it's more like cackling sound. And that voice is the voice that I have students go through the passaggio, F sharp, G sharp sometimes, depending on the voice. And then the upper stuff is that's a whole different ballgame and not worth getting into now. So that's typically, I'll encourage exercise like that. So simple one I'll do is just have them sing high. I'll say sing high, and they'll go high. No, firmly say it. Say high. Go high. Say it firmer. High. High. Okay, now I want you to do that on pitch. High, high, high. That simple exercise clears up so many issues just by clarifying what they should do in certain registration. When they get higher, we work on the calling. When we get higher, we work on the cackling, and then so on and so forth. So those are some of my go-tos. How about you?
That's awesome. Well, I was just going to say, also, like, not even getting into technical things, find people in your choir that are doing all these things right and have them sing and have them be an example, and then have people model after them and celebrate the crap out of them. That's
great.
And then,
that's a great way to normalize too, right?
Normalizing it. And, you want to get kids to, and I'm going to talk about encouraging vulnerability in the classroom. It's so important in the tenor bass choir classroom or the mutant classroom. Yeah. But you want every single person to be comfortable singing by themselves, because it's so important to constantly assess them. I find it more important to do that with tenor bass voices and treble voices, because most of the time treble voices, they just kind of understand singing. That's not totally true all the time, obviously, but more so than tenor bass voices. Yeah. So it's so important to encourage that vulnerability and make sure that they are just unashamed to sing in front of each other. Also, like, I had this student who he came in and he had never been in choir before, absolutely tone deaf, just kind of would sing down here, his voice has recently changed, so he would come down here and I'd say, okay, a little bit higher, you need to go up a little bit maybe, but mainly it's just all down there. Recently, he matched pitch like one time and we stopped class and we all freaked out. And what we all did is we all turned to him. I stood on a stool and I was like, okay, everyone, because I think there was like a test going on across the hall, so we had to do it pretty quietly. But I was like, how Patrick Mahomes, like right before a game, he's going to go down to one end zone. I think it's the defending end zone or the other team's end zone. He's going to run down there and then he's going to beat his chest and go, ah! I was like, you're going to turn to this kid and you're going to, when I say 3, 2, 1, you're going to all do that like quietly and just be like, ah! And they all did that and he absolutely loved it. And then I kept testing him on some other things and he started matching pitch again. And we all did the same thing to him. And I asked him in front of the whole class, because there's this other kid who's still really struggling. And so I wanted this kid to really hear, and he wanted to be celebrated too. And so I asked this kid who had struggled all year, I asked him, what changed? Like, how did you start matching pitch? He said, I started listening more. I was like, I did not pay him to say that, I swear. Wow. But he started listening more. And he's like, once I started listening more and just kind of paying attention to what everybody else was doing and kind of backing off a little bit, sure, I started to figure it out. And I would like, there's this thing that we do in our classroom called stop, drop, and roll. Do you want to go into what that is? Because I think he was doing this a lot.
Yeah, so one thing that we're kind of adamant about is that you're going to sing the right pitch. And then what we tell students to do, and this might seem, at first, it might seem like we're inhumane or something, but we're not actually. I think it's the most reasonable thing to do with students. When they don't sing in tune, we tell them to stop singing. And the reason is because if you're singing out of tune, and you're just singing louder and louder and louder, you're not gaining anything. You're not becoming better. You're just accentuating the problem.
And that's what this kid was doing. And then he stopped and he dropped out and he was listening a lot. So sorry, go into it. I just interrupted.
You stop, you drop. Wait, you drop out. Actually, you stop and you drop critique on yourself, but I like that too. You stop and you drop out. Yeah. I like that. And then once you drop the critique on yourself and you realize what's happening, you roll on once you feel like you have facility and you know what's happening, but we're pretty adamant about that. And that's a great way. Also, something we've done is we've, along the lines of affirming, we've really affirmed students for singing well. So I can think of a few things. The Legion of Doom. Mm-hmm, yeah. So we had this thing called the Legion of Doom.
We brought it back in 6th hour.
Oh, you did?
Year. Yeah.
So we had certain levels of the Legion of Doom. So the platinum membership of Legion of Doom meant
they would get a sticky note as their membership card.
something ridiculous. And that meant you had immaculate pitch. Like you really did a great job. But sometimes you'd be like a gold member. Gold members, you're good. Or sometimes you had like a silver medal meant you were kind of singing in tune one time. You're making progress in that direction.
And then we'd just be like, okay, platinum members only get to sing this section as like an example.
That's right, yeah.
And then it's like, okay, add the gold members in. Yeah. So like everybody has, like silver's not bad.
Yeah.
Like everybody has a certain level.
And they would talk to us before class about it. It's like, how can I get into platinum membership? Like, how can I get in there? I can think of a few students saying, how do I get into this platinum membership? Like,
yeah. I mean, and it's
question.
working again in my non-audition tenor bass choir, 6th hour.
Or is it, you also were you there for poopology ever?
Yeah, poopology.
So poopology was something, we have these stuffed poop emojis in the classroom, and we would have like a certain chant. It's a poopology chant, and basically everyone had to graduate with their poopology degree. You can graduate with your poopology degree if you sang a passage in tune. And once they would sing it in tune, we would go, all righty, oh, poopology. I'm thinking of Ace Ventura. That's where I got that from. All righty then. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have seen that one time.
Okay.
The only part that I remember that is ingrained in my mind, what do you think it is?
There's so many things I don't know. That's
The
too broad.
most disturbing part of the whole thing.
The guy coming out of a rhino?
Absolutely. That's the
Okay,
only
yeah,
thing
that's a
that I
great one.
remember from that movie is
I
that
know.
because
That is
I
very disturbing.
can't forget.
Yeah, it was totally wild. So that was a thing, and the kids love that, and they love having that graduation, knowing that they were successful at a certain thing.
Yeah. So yeah, along the lines of vulnerability, like having kids sing by themselves encourages that, and then also program stuff with your tenor bass voices that's got some meaningful text behind it, and have these deep conversations with these boys, because I feel like in our society it's so hard to normalize feeling as a man. And so having those discussions with your tenor bass voices, like, it's okay to cry sometimes. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have these different emotions, but it's not okay to just hold it in. And it's so important to talk about it openly and freely. And I've noticed that as I've had those conversations with these boys who are like, these jocks on the football team and all this stuff, they become, not necessarily softer physically or anything like that. Like, they're still competitive athletes, but they are just more approachable. They are okay with showing love to each other. They're okay with showing kindness and care to one another. My 6th hour tenor bass choir is full of all these athletes and just like these tough boys. They give out more hugs than any other class I've ever experienced. They also, like, if we're watching a movie or something, like around Christmas time or something, they will like get on the floor and lay next to each other and like lay on each other's shoulders.
Yeah. But let's be real though. Like, are there any other choirs more touchy than tenor bass choirs?
But proper
ever?
Touches.
Yeah,
are
I see a lot of
important.
inappropriate touching sometimes, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't
They do
like
that a lot.
that.
Yeah.
But I encourage that because it's important to have those conversations with boys, and it's just gonna help. It's just gonna help them in the future and help our society in the future, I feel like.
Agreed.
So that's important. And what a better class to do it in than choir. Now it's time to shout out our next sponsor, Endeavor Music Publishing. Endeavor is dedicated to publishing the best in new and innovative choral music, and to the idea that composers should earn the majority of their music sales.
That's the great thing about this company. Royalties for Endeavor composers are over 5 times the industry standards. That's a lot.
Woo.
So you can trust that your purchase supports artists who created it.
Endeavor is currently seeking out emerging talent and established composers. Do you want to earn 5 times the amount? Go with Endeavor. If you are interested in having one of your pieces published, visit the submissions page on their website.
Before finalizing the rep for your next concert, visit EndeavorMusicPublishing.com and peruse their titles. Thanks again to Endeavor Music Publishing for sponsoring today's episode.
Now it's time for our blind listening segment. In this segment, we have taken a recording that was submitted to our Google form that is in the description box below. And this is a 7th and 8th grade choir. It's an SATB choir. And they have submitted this recording of Ad Astra by Jacob Narvarud. And they would like us to listen to it and react blindly. So we're going to react. We've never listened to it before. And we're just going to have our natural thoughts come out as we listen. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's do it.
The bass and tenors sound amazing.
Woo!
This is 7/8.
7th and 8th grade. Some nice resonance there too.
It's a gorgeous sound for 7th and 8th grade boy tenor bass.
Some good diction there too. Woo!
Beautiful. The tempo's a little out of control, but the sound is gorgeous.
But that accompanist is keeping up.
Wait, the accompanist is great. It's
Yeah.
just they don't understand rhythmically what's happening.
Some nice swells there.
Good. It's easy, relaxed sound. I preferred the first sound as opposed to this sound. This sound is great.
This
but
needs more fluff, just a little bit more fluff.
Oh,
I feel like the tenors and basses are overpowering just a little bit the treble voices. The treble voices have that extra fluff, and the tenor basses should copy paste that onto their sound.
See, that's a good sound right there from the bass and tenors. This is a
And
nice
this.
sound. This is great.
Yeah, it's not pushed. That's where we start pushing a little bit. Woo! I like that. That section's always good. Yeah. I mean, overall, 7th and 8th grade SATB,
This is an excellent 7th,
That's
8th
awesome.
grade group for sure.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. I feel like with my, because I mean, I teach 7th and 8th grade SATB as well every single day. I feel like that is so natural for those TBs to want to push whenever it's a forte or a double
Yeah.
forte or a fortissimo or whatever in the music. That is always something that they want to do, and so encouraging that fluff and like listening to the treble voices do that section, and then say, okay, can you make it fluffy like them?
Yeah.
And have like a competition between the two. That would be because they have the ability to have that sound because
Yeah.
they did it so many times and it was so awesome. It's just
Yeah.
sometimes they get overexcited.
So it was interesting hearing this group in the context of a mixed middle level ensemble. So I think the tricky thing is that resonance comes at a cost sometimes. So you can really, really try to get great resonance in the sound, but often it comes at the expense of pitch, or it comes at the expense of pleasant tone to listen to. Just like pitch comes at the expense of something sometimes, right? So if you want a middle level choir to sing extremely in tune, often that comes with a little more breath. And when I say breath, I mean some breath escaping in the sound often at times, taking heat off of the voice and then finding the balance. I think the key at the end of the day is balance. When they first started, what I heard was a gorgeous, beautiful resonance, especially coming from the tenors and bass sound. With the sopranos and altos, I heard consistently like nice, pleasant sound that wasn't pushed, and it never got to that point throughout the entire thing. With the tenor basses, of course, as the music gets louder or the tessitura gets higher, they start to push more. So I kind of view it like a box of sound. Like, how do we stay in this box and keep it that beautifully, and despite it getting louder or despite it getting higher, you still stay within that box? I think if they learn to balance that line and not get out of that box, what you're hearing there, it has the potential to be an elite middle school choir if they can find that balance in the sound.
The dynamic contrast in some of those sections was great. Sometimes that's very difficult at that age group for them to understand that musicality and the musicianship that takes.
I thought it was an exciting performance. The one thing I will say just a little bit critically was but a lot of choirs want to go, especially younger ones, they would go Da 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 da
Yeah.
da 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 da, and they lose that sense of the beat. So a little bit of beat work, maybe taking it slower here, having them tap the beat. I normally have students tap it right on their sternum, just lightly, so I don't have to hear them like not keeping a beat with their hands or something. So just lightly tap here, so they can feel the sense of the beat, and they can hear that the syncopation that's happening.
Blast a metronome too sometimes during rehearsal.
Yeah.
But fantastic work.
Yeah, really good.
Now it's time for our last segment, Fact or Fiction. In this segment, I will read a story from a choir director or from artificial intelligence. And Danny has to figure out if this is a real-life human being or if this is AI, ChatGPT, and then I edit it. So, are you ready, Danny?
I'm ready to use my deductive logic to figure this out.
You've been pretty good lately, so we shall see. I'm only reading one
It's only
story.
one, then it's probably going to be fact. Fact, I'm guessing fact. No, I don't. Just read the story first. Go ahead.
No comment. One late February evening, I was driving a few students back to the school after a wonderful choral activity.
I'm sorry,
was-
you say driving a few students back to the school?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to let me
Keep going.
finish?
Sorry, I just want to clarify what I just heard.
I was feeling pretty spiffy in the school's brand new transit van.
Oh, okay.
Everything was fine until someone's sweet dog ran onto the highway. Naturally, I was going 70 miles per hour and couldn't stop in an instant. Unfortunately, there was a new addition to doggy heaven that night. Being a first-year teacher, I didn't know how to handle the situation. I pulled over and quickly turned to the students to make sure they were okay, and then I boldly stated, "I'm going to call my dad." My dad told me to call my boss. Instead, I called a colleague. They did not answer. Then I called another colleague. They told me to call my boss, just like my dad did. He told me everything was fine, and then he had me describe the damage done to the vehicle and to the dog. He wanted pictures of the animal to send to insurance. So I locked the students in the car, walked up the highway to find the biggest portion of the dog that remained, and I took pictures of it. At this point, 15 minutes had passed since the original death sentence, and several other vehicles had also hit the same carcass. It wasn't a pretty sight. I walked back to the van and got in. I didn't know what to do. On the remaining drive home, we held a small funeral service for the dog, whom we appropriately named Rudolph due to his sudden red appearance. We read scripture.
What? Because of the blood?
Yes.
Oh, no.
We read
This person is sadistic. If this is an actual person, this person is messed up in the head.
We read scripture to help. Again, this could be AI, and then I've edited it and had a really good time. Who knows?
I see that.
We read scripture to help with the loss of a loved one. One student made up a eulogy, and I sang. It has been a few years since this happened. There is now a shrine to Rudolph in my classroom, and I force my freshmen to listen to this story year after year. Fact or fiction?
Okay. You said late February?
That's the question you have?
You said, I'm just clarifying, you said it was late
It
February.
was in February.
Because I'm thinking likely this person's from the state of Missouri, may or not be true, but late February, what event would you have to take a school van to students at?
AI
Okay.
doesn't know when events happen. So it could have picked a random month. Or there could be an event that
I mean,
you
late
don't go to.
February is very specific. So
I don't know if it said late February.
the red,
said-
Rudolph, because colored in red, that's just like next level.
Again, I have a
sadistic
lot of
and
fun
disgusting.
editing a lot of these AI stuff, so you have to keep that in mind too.
Fact.
You think it's fact?
Yes, and I think this is a way for you to get me to say fiction, but it's clearly fact.
But it's clearly not. No, it is fact.
I
It's
know it's fact.
fact. That was Juliana Pyle.
Hold on, I just want to clarify.
It was late February.
Was the Rudolph thing actually said in there?
Yeah.
Because of its red appearance?
Yes. I took out some stuff because she was pretty descriptive in a lot of things, and so I tried
And
to make
found
it
the
sound,
largest part of the corpse
She wrote that
of
part.
the carcass of the dog?
This is all real.
Oh no. Okay, so for real, I killed a possum the other day and I felt terrible about it. On my way back from Mississippi, it was judging a choral festival, and on the way back, going like 80 miles an hour in Arkansas, go figure. possum.
Is that where all the good possums live?
I guess, you know, and I
around here.
and I ran over it, and then I heard it from the front and the back, and that's when you know it's bad. When you go, zoom, zoom, I think it's dead. I didn't call it Rudolph though, because I'm not a sadistic freak.
When also possums suck. One of my favorite things that I've ever heard, there's this Christian comedian named Jaron Myers, and one of his bits is that he talks about what he likes to do at airports whenever he's just sitting there to entertain himself. He'll download a bunch of pictures of like dead possums, and he will just start airdropping them to random people that have their airdrop on, and then he'll just like start looking around to see who's going to have like a reaction to a dead possum showing up on their phone, which I think is the most genius idea ever.
On the trip back from Denver or to Denver, I forget. I think it was back from Denver. No, to Denver, we did this. I would, on the band app, I would message everyone in the group except for one person. And I would say, everyone look out the window and pretend like there's a huge thing out there. And you're kind of freaked out by it. So everyone would look out the window. It's like, oh my gosh, what is that? What is that? And the one person didn't get the message. It was so funny because she was looking at everyone else. She's like, you guys are so stupid. There's not even anything out there. Like thinking she's cool. And we did that to Jennifer, the assistant director, when we were going through Denver. I messaged everyone except for her saying, everyone ask her, because she was narrating about the city of Denver because she lived there. She was narrating about the city of Denver on the mic in the coach vehicle, and then I don't know, coach bus,
the charter bus,
charter bus. I forget. I don't know what you call it. Anyway, I write to everyone. All right, someone ask her a bunch of questions about Anglican chant. Right now, someone asked about questions about Anglican chant. So then one student raised their hand. Excuse me, Mrs. Stammers, can you tell me more about Anglican chant? I was hoping, I don't really understand the nuance of it. Could you help me understand this? And she's like, oh, absolutely, of course. And then she goes to town talking about Anglican chant. And then we start asking her other questions of stuff that would specifically interest her. But it's funny what you can do sometimes.
Beautiful. Well, that wraps up this week's episode of The Choir Guys. Don't forget to subscribe to The Choir Guys channel on YouTube to be notified when new episodes are coming out. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Once again, The Choir Guys is brought to you by GIA Publications and Walton Music. Make sure to browse their website before programming music for your next concert.
You can follow the show on all social media at The Choir Guys Pod to catch bonus content throughout the week. Feel free to message us through these platforms if you want to hear us talk about something specific on the show.
Also, tune in next time for a discussion all about contemporary a cappella music featuring J.D. Frizzell.
Woo! That's going to be exciting. That's going to be so exciting. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in a few weeks. Bye.